This is the story of how my cheating and lying wife, she betrayed me and lived a double life. I always thought my marriage was solid. Madison and I had been together for 10 years, building a life that felt comfortable and secure. We had two children, a cozy home, and routines that made it easy to believe everything was exactly as it should be. But one evening, while reviewing our bank account for an upcoming family vacation, I stumbled upon something that shattered my sense of normalcy. At first, the charges seemed small: purchases at a boutique I'd never heard of, reservations at expensive restaurants I hadn't been invited to. Then I noticed a recurring payment to a gym we didn't belong to. Madison worked out at the community center. She'd never mentioned anything about joining another gym. I stared at the screen, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe it was something for work or a gift she hadn't told me about. But as I scrolled further, I realized the pattern wasn't random. There was something deliberate about it, something she didn't want me to see. The next day, I decided to investigate. I visited the gym, pretending I was interested in joining. When I casually mentioned that my wife might already be a member, the receptionist didn't hesitate to confirm Madison's name. I left the gym feeling like my world was tilting on its axis. Why would she hide this from me? What else was she hiding? That evening, Madison came home later than usual. Her hair was styled, her makeup perfect, and she was wearing a dress that felt too formal for a regular workday. She kissed me absently on the cheek before heading upstairs. Her phone was on the nightstand, and while she showered, I picked it up, hesitating for a moment before unlocking it. Her messages seemed normal at first: group chats with friends, conversations with her sister. But then, I saw a name I didn't recognize: Daniel. Their messages were casual at first, but soon shifted into something unmistakably intimate. They mentioned dinner plans, wine, and a meeting set for the next evening. My hands trembled as I scrolled further, finding pictures of the two of them together. Nothing explicit, but their closeness told me everything I needed to know. I put the phone down and sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Madison was leading a double life. For the next few weeks, I watched her carefully. She told me she had late meetings. Her phone's tracker showed her in places she shouldn't have been. She claimed she was running errands, but I followed her one afternoon and saw her meet Daniel at a downtown cafe. They sat close, laughing, their faces glowing with a warmth that had been missing from our home for months. Our 10th wedding anniversary was approaching, and Madison suggested we host a family barbecue. Her enthusiasm almost made me laugh. How could she act so carefree while hiding something so destructive? I agreed to the barbecue, but only because I saw it as the perfect moment to confront her. The day of the barbecue, friends and family filled our backyard. Madison played the gracious hostess, chatting and laughing with everyone. I stayed in the background watching her, feeling the anger simmer beneath my skin. As the evening wound down, I stood and tapped my glass to get everyone's attention. The chatter died away and all eyes turned to me. Madison stood beside me, smiling brightly. "I just wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight," I began, my voice steady. "It's been 10 years of marriage with Madison. 10 years of love, trust, and family. At least that's what I thought." The smile fell from her face. "Evan," she said, her voice uneasy, "what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth, Madison," I said, turning to her, "because you clearly don't know how to." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd created. "This," I said, holding up the screen for everyone to see, "is what Madison has been doing while she's supposed to be working late or running errands. Meet Daniel." Gasps rippled through the crowd as I scrolled through photos of Madison and Daniel together, texts between them, receipts from their outings. Madison's parents stared in stunned silence. My sister's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "Evan, stop," Madison whispered, her face pale. "Why?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Because you don't want everyone to know the truth? You've been lying to me, to our children, to everyone here. You thought you could live two lives without consequence." Her mother stepped forward, but Madison raised a trembling hand, stopping her. She turned to me, her voice breaking. "Please, can we talk about this privately?" "Privately?" I laughed bitterly. "Like the way you privately built a relationship with someone else?" "No, Madison. This is happening now." The backyard fell into an uncomfortable silence as Madison's face crumpled. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't feel pity. "This marriage is over," I said, my voice cold and final. "You can have your second life. I just won't be part of it." Without another word, I walked into the house, leaving her standing there under the string lights, surrounded by the wreckage of her lies. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it, my heart pounding in my chest. The muffled sound of whispers and murmurs drifted in from the backyard, but I didn't care. I had said my piece, and there was no turning back now. The weight of what had just happened began to settle over me. 10 years of marriage, dismantled in a single evening. I had expected some sense of relief, but instead a hollow ache spread through my chest. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window at the backyard. Madison was still there, frozen in place, her face streaked with tears as her parents and friends surrounded her, trying to console her. Her mother looked up at the house, her eyes meeting mine for a brief moment before she turned back to her daughter. Good, I thought. Let her explain herself to them. Let her dig her way out of this mess. I moved to the living room and sat down heavily on the couch. My phone buzzed with incoming messages, likely from friends who had just witnessed the spectacle. I ignored them. My focus was on what came next. The sound of the sliding glass door opening broke my thoughts. Madison stepped inside, her face pale and blotchy, her usual composure shattered. She closed the door behind her and hesitated, as if she wasn't sure whether to approach me. Evan, she began, her voice trembling. Please, we need to talk. I looked up at her, my expression unreadable. What is there to talk about, Madison? I think everything's pretty clear. Her lips quivered as she sat down on the edge of the coffee table across from me. I made a mistake, she whispered. A terrible, terrible mistake. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. A mistake? A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. What you did was calculated, deliberate. Don't insult me by calling it a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. It started with work meetings, and then it just got out of hand. I didn't know how to stop it. You didn't know how to stop? I snapped, my voice rising. How about not starting in the first place? How about telling me the truth before you dragged me and our kids into this mess? She flinched at my words, her hands wringing together. I love you, she said desperately. I love our family. I never wanted to lose any of this. My jaw tightened, and I leaned forward, narrowing the distance between us. You love me? You love our family? I repeated, my voice low and sharp. You sure have a funny way of showing it, Madison. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed them, our kids. You shattered the life we built together for what? For him? Her sobs deepened, and she reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Please, she begged. Please let me fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll leave him. I'll go to counseling. Just don't end us. Don't throw away everything we've built. I stood abruptly, pacing the room as anger and heartbreak warred inside me. Her words felt hollow, like she was grasping at straws to save herself from the fallout. I didn't throw this away, Madison. You did, I said, stopping to face her. You made the choice to lie, to cheat, to risk everything. And now you want me to pretend like none of it happened? That's not how this works. She stood as well, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Evan, I swear, I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do. Tell me how to make this right. You can't, I said simply. You can't undo this. There's no going back to the way things were. Her face crumpled, and she sank back onto the coffee table, her sobs echoing through the room. I turned away, my gaze falling on the framed photos lining the mantel, pictures of our wedding, family vacations, the kids' birthdays. Each one felt like a lie now, tainted by what I had uncovered. We're done, Madison, I said quietly, my voice heavy with finality. I'll stay here tonight for the kids' sake, but tomorrow I'm leaving. We'll talk to a lawyer, figure out custody, divide the house. But as far as I'm concerned, this marriage is over. Her head shot up, panic flashing in her eyes. No, Evan, please. Stop, I interrupted, holding up a hand. Don't make this harder than it already is. I walked past her, heading for the stairs. She called after me, her voice breaking, but I didn't stop. As I reached the top of the stairs, I glanced toward the kids' rooms, their soft breathing carrying through the hall. For their sake, I would stay calm, stay composed. But the life Madison and I had built together was in ruins, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to forgive her for destroying it. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. The silence of the house felt oppressive, broken only by Madison's muffled sobs downstairs. I closed my eyes, steeling myself for the days to come. Tomorrow, everything would change. I sat on the couch, the weight of the evening pressing down on me. Madison had stormed into the house minutes ago, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she slammed the sliding door shut behind her. I could hear her muttering under her breath as she made her way toward me, the faint scent of her expensive perfume trailing behind. Evan, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. What the hell was that? I didn't look up. I just took another sip of water, staring blankly ahead. Don't ignore me, she snapped, stepping into my line of sight. You think you can humiliate me like that in front of everyone and then just sit here like nothing happened? Finally, I raised my eyes to meet hers. Humiliate you? I asked, my voice calm but laced with venom. That's rich coming from the woman who's been sneaking around behind my back for God knows how long. She crossed her arms, glaring at me. You had no right to air our private business in front of my family. My parents. Evan, do you know how embarrassing that was for me? Embarrassing for you? I repeated, standing up slowly. Do you even hear yourself? You're worried about your embarrassment? What about me? What about our kids? You're the one who destroyed this marriage, Madison, not me. Oh, give me a break, she shot back, no rolling her eyes. Don't act like you're some innocent victim here. Maybe if you weren't so predictable, so boring, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere for a little excitement. Her words hit me like a slap, but I clenched my fists, refusing to let her see the sting. Is that how you justify it? Blame me for your choices? You didn't have to do anything, Madison. You chose this. You chose to cheat. And you chose to be a dull, self-righteous whore, she hissed, stepping closer. Do you even realize how suffocating it is living with you? You're always so serious, so perfect. I couldn't breathe, Evan. I needed something more. I stared at her, disbelief mingling with fury. Something more? You mean Daniel? The guy who's probably as shallow and vapid as you've become? Her lips curled into a sneer. At least Daniel knows how to make me feel alive, which is more than I can say for you. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Alive? Is that what you call it? Sneaking around like a coward, lying to your husband, betraying your family? That's your idea of living? She threw up her hands. Oh, stop with the melodrama, Evan. You're acting like I murdered someone. People cheat. It happens. Grow up. The sheer audacity of her words left me momentarily speechless. When I finally spoke, my voice was low and steady. People cheat, Madison, but not everyone tears their family apart while pretending everything's fine. You didn't just cheat. You lied to my face every single day, and you did it without a shred of remorse. She snorted, tossing her hair over her shoulder. Oh, please, don't act like you didn't know something was going on. You're not that stupid. You just didn't want to face it because you're too weak to deal with reality. Weak. The word burned in my chest, igniting a fire I'd been trying to keep under control. You think I'm weak? I said, my voice rising. You think I'm the weak one? I've been holding this family together while you've been out playing house with some stranger. I've been the one raising our kids, paying the bills, making sure everything runs smoothly while you act like a spoiled teenager chasing a thrill. Her eyes narrowed, and she jabbed a finger at my chest. Don't you dare play the martyr, Evan. You're so obsessed with being the good husband and the perfect father that you don't even see how suffocating you are. No wonder I wanted out. You're unbearable. I stepped back, shaking my head in disbelief. Unbearable, I repeated. You know what's unbearable, Madison? Watching the woman I loved turn into someone I don't even recognize? You're cruel, selfish, and completely incapable of taking responsibility for your actions. She laughed coldly. Oh, spare me the lecture. You're just mad because you couldn't control me. You thought I'd stay in your neat little box forever, didn't you? Well, guess what, Evan? I'm not your perfect little wife anymore. Perfect? I snapped, my voice finally breaking. You never were, Madison. You've been a liar and a coward this entire time, hiding behind your fake smiles and pretty words. But now everyone knows who you really are. Her expression darkened, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out physically. But instead, she stepped back, her voice icy. You'll regret this, Evan. When this all blows over and you realize you've thrown away everything, don't come crawling back to me. I stared at her, my jaw tight. The only thing I regret is not seeing you for who you really are sooner. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the living room, seething. I knew there was no salvaging this, no turning back. Madison had shown her true colors, and they were as cold and bitter as the night outside. Madison didn't speak to me for the rest of the night, but I could feel her presence like a storm cloud, dark and charged. She stomped around the house with exaggerated movements, slamming drawers and doors as though I'd somehow wronged her. The kids, thankfully, had already been tucked into bed, oblivious to the chaos brewing between their parents. I sat in the guest room, scrolling through my phone, not really reading anything. My mind was too restless. I could still hear her moving around, muttering angrily to herself. Then, just as I thought she'd finally calmed down, the door to the guest room flew open. You're not sleeping here, she barked, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. I raised an eyebrow, not bothering to sit up. And where exactly do you think I'm supposed to sleep, Madison? The lawn? She sneered. I don't care. You're not sleeping here. You humiliated me in front of everyone, my family, my friends, and now you think you can sulk in the guest room like some wounded puppy? No, you're the one who ruined this, so get out. Ruined this? I repeated, laughing bitterly. Madison, you ruined this the second you decided to cheat on me. I didn't humiliate you. You did that to yourself. All I did was pull back the curtain. Her face flushed with anger. You're unbelievable, Evan. You think you're so righteous, don't you? Like you're the poor, innocent victim in all of this. Well, newsflash, you weren't exactly the perfect husband. I stood then, slowly, my hands clenched at my sides. Oh, please, I said, my voice low and even. Go ahead, Madison. Enlighten me. What did I do that was so horrible it justified you sneaking around with another man, working hard to provide for this family, raising our kids while you played the part of the perfect wife? Tell me how that makes me the bad guy. She rolled her eyes and leaned against the doorframe, her posture dripping with contempt. You're just so boring, Evan, so predictable. Everything in your world is neat and tidy, planned out to the last detail. There's no spontaneity, no excitement. I felt like I was dying inside, living the Stepford life you forced on me. My jaw tightened as I stared at her. So your solution was to have an affair? To lie to me, to the kids, to everyone around you? You didn't even have the decency to end things before running off with someone else. Instead, you let me keep believing we had a happy marriage while you were off screwing Daniel behind my back. Her expression didn't waver. Daniel made me feel alive, she said, her tone defiant. Something you haven't done in years. You're just there, Evan. A paycheck, a babysitter. You've become a placeholder in your own damn life. Her words were like daggers, but I refused to let her see the pain they caused. I took a deep breath, letting the anger wash over me and settle into something colder. If that's how you feel, I said quietly, then why are you still here? Why not pack your things and leave? Go be with Daniel, since he's so much better than me. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty. Don't be ridiculous, she said, her voice faltering slightly. This is my house. I'm not going anywhere. I laughed, shaking my head. Of course not. Because it's not just about Daniel, is it? You want your comfortable life. The house, the stability, the money, all the things I provide. You want to have it both ways. But guess what, Madison? You can't. Not anymore. Her expression hardened again, and she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. You think you're going to waltz out of here and take everything with you? The kids, the house, I'll make sure you get nothing, Evan. Do you hear me? Nothing. I stared at her, my voice calm but deadly. You can try, Madison, but you're forgetting something. You're the one who destroyed this marriage. I've got the evidence, I've got witnesses, and believe me, I'll use every last bit of it if I have to. Her face twisted into a sneer. You're pathetic, she spat. You'll do anything to play the victim, won't you? Fine, Evan. Take your little pity party and get out of my sight, but don't think for a second this is over. I didn't respond. I just grabbed the blanket from the bed and walked past her, heading for the couch downstairs. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I glanced back, catching a glimpse of her standing at the top, silhouetted against the dim hallway light. She looked like a stranger, a cruel, bitter stranger I no longer recognized. Collapsing onto the couch, I closed my eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath. Tomorrow, I'd call a lawyer. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of untangling my life from hers. But tonight, I let the weight of it all settle in. The woman I had loved for a decade was gone, and in her place was someone I wanted nothing to do with. The next morning was eerily quiet. Madison's stormy presence lingered in the house like the echo of thunder after a downpour. I hadn't slept much on the couch, my mind too restless as I replayed the previous night's argument. The anger in her voice, the venom in her words, they clung to me like a second skin, impossible to shake off. I poured a cup of coffee, standing in the kitchen as the sunlight streamed through the window. I could hear the faint sound of the kids laughing upstairs, their voices light and carefree, oblivious to the crumbling marriage beneath their feet. Madison eventually came downstairs. She moved like a predator, her eyes narrowing when she saw me standing by the counter. She didn't say anything at first, just poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the island, studying me like I was the enemy. I assume you're going to run off to your lawyer today, she finally said, her tone cold and dismissive. I didn't look at her. That's right. Her lips twisted into a smirk. Good. Let's get this over with. You think you're going to walk out of here looking like the victim, but you won't. You'll look like a pathetic man who couldn't keep his wife happy. I took a long sip of coffee, forcing myself to stay calm. The only thing pathetic is you trying to justify what you did. You can tell yourself whatever you want, Madison, but you're the one who cheated. You're the one who lied. And when this is over, everyone will know exactly who you are. Her face flushed with anger, and she set her mug down with a loud clink. You think you're going to turn this into some moral victory? Please. People cheat all the time, Evan. It's not the end of the world. The only reason you're making this such a big deal is because you're too weak to handle it like an adult. I turned to face her fully, my voice low and steady. You keep calling me weak, Madison. But tell me, who's the one hiding behind lies and excuses? Who's the one who couldn't even face the truth until I forced it out into the open? If anyone here is weak, it's you. She glared at me, her fists clenched at her sides. For a moment, it looked like she wanted to say something, but she held back, her jaw tightening instead. Without another word, she stormed past me and out of the kitchen, her heels clicking against the floor as she disappeared into the living room. I let out a long breath, setting my mug down. The tension was unbearable, but I knew it wouldn't last much longer. The lawyer had assured me things would move quickly, especially with the evidence I had. Madison might want to fight, but I was prepared for one. By the afternoon, I had met with the lawyer again, providing the last of the evidence: texts, photos, receipts. The lawyer's expression was unreadable, but her voice was firm. This will hold up in court. She's not going to come out of this unscathed. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. As much as I wanted to see Madison face the consequences of her actions, the reality of tearing our lives apart still weighed heavily on me. When I got home, the house was quiet. Madison was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. She barely looked up when I walked in. Did you have fun playing the wounded husband today? She asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I ignored her, heading upstairs to check on the kids. They were playing a board game in their room, their laughter filling the air like a balm on my frayed nerves. For a moment, I leaned against the door frame, watching them, a pang of guilt hitting me square in the chest. They didn't deserve this. Dad, can you play with us? My daughter asked, her bright eyes full of hope. Maybe later, sweetheart, I said softly. I just need to take care of something first. I kissed her on the head and closed the door, my heart heavy as I made my way back downstairs. Madison was still on the couch, her legs crossed, her posture exuding indifference. I want to talk about custody, I said, standing in the doorway. She looked up, her brow furrowing. Already planning on taking the kids away from me, are you? I'm not taking them away, I said, my voice steady. I just want what's best for them. Her laugh was sharp and hollow. And you think that's you? Please, Evan. You don't even know how to handle them without me. I took a step closer, my fists clenching at my sides. I know how to handle them just fine. Unlike you, I actually put them first. They deserve better than this toxic environment you've created. Her smile faded, replaced by a scowl. You think you're so much better than me? Newsflash, Evan, you're not. You're just a bitter, boring man who can't handle the fact that I wanted more out of life than playing house with you. I stared at her, my anger simmering. You wanted more? Fine, you can have more. But you don't get to drag the kids into your mess. She stood abruptly, her voice rising. Don't you dare act like I don't love my children. Everything I've done for them. For us. For us, I barked, my voice finally breaking. Sneaking around with another man was for us. Lying to your family was for us. Stop lying to yourself, Madison. You did this for you, no one else. She stood there, breathing heavily, her face flushed with anger. For the first time, she seemed at a loss for words. I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, her lies unraveling around her. The divorce papers were served a week later. Madison's reaction was as explosive as I expected, but I didn't engage. I kept my focus on the kids, on getting through each day, one step closer to the life I deserved. It wasn't easy. Madison fought me at every turn, her bitterness fueling her every move. But In the end, the truth won out. The evidence was undeniable, and the court saw through her charade. When the dust finally settled, I was granted custody of the kids, and Madison was left with nothing but her anger and regret. Standing in my new apartment months later, the kids laughing in the next room, I finally felt a sense of peace. I had lost a decade of my life to Madison's lies, but I had gained something far more valuable: freedom. And that, I realized, was worth everything. Madison's downfall was both chaotic and inevitable. After the papers were served, she turned into someone even more unrecognizable. Every conversation was a battle, her venom sharper, her words more calculated to wound. But it didn't matter anymore. She couldn't touch me. The courtroom felt cold and sterile on the day we finalized the divorce. Madison sat across the aisle from me, her lawyer whispering in her ear, but her eyes rarely left mine. She glared at me, as though I had betrayed her. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her lawyer tried every trick in the book to paint me as the unfit husband, the inattentive father, the man responsible for the disintegration of our marriage. But the evidence I had, her texts, the photos, the receipts, spoke louder than her lies. Madison had always been good at manipulation, but this time it wasn't enough. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me primary custody of the kids. Madison would have visitation rights, but she wouldn't be able to control my life anymore. As the gavel came down, sealing the judgment, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. Madison stormed out of the courtroom without a word. Her parents followed after her, their faces strained with disappointment. I stayed behind for a moment, letting the reality of the situation sink in. I was free. The first few weeks after the divorce were a whirlwind. Moving into a new apartment, adjusting to life as a single father, answering the kids' questions in a way that shielded them from the ugliness of it all. It was exhausting but liberating. Madison, of course, didn't make things easy. Her bitterness spilled over into her time with the kids. She would fill their heads with half-truths and exaggerated stories, trying to turn them against me. But children are smarter than we give them credit for. They saw through her bitterness, and over time her influence waned. One evening, months after the divorce, I sat on the couch with my daughter curled up next to me, her head resting on my shoulder. My son was on the floor, playing with his Legos. The apartment wasn't as big or as fancy as the house we used to have, but it was warm. It felt like home. "Dad," my daughter said softly, looking up at me with wide eyes, "are we going to be okay?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We already are, sweetheart." And it was true. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. I wasn't weighed down by Madison's lies, her bitterness, or her attempts to control me. I had my kids, my peace, and a future that was finally mine to shape. Madison, meanwhile, seemed to spiral further into her anger. I heard from mutual friends that her relationship with Daniel had fallen apart shortly after the divorce. He didn't want the baggage she brought with her, and when he left, so did her illusions of a perfect second life. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel joy at her misery. I felt nothing at all. She was a part of my past now, a chapter I had closed. Life moved on. The kids and I created new routines and filled with laughter and quiet moments of joy. I threw myself into being the best father I could be, savoring every second I had with them. One day, as we walked along the park trail near our apartment, my son tugged on my hand and looked up at me. "Dad, are you happy?" I stopped, crouching down so I could look him in the eyes. "I am," I said, and I meant it. The woman I had loved for a decade was gone, but in her absence, I had found something far more valuable: myself. And as I watched my kids run ahead on the trail, their laughter echoing in the air, I knew we were finally where we were meant to be. The past was behind us, and the future was wide open.